Thanks for tuning in to the Pacey Performance Podcast. So this evening, I'm delighted to welcome Alek Gross. So welcome back to the podcast, mate.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me back.
It's been a long time, hasn't it?
It has, I think. When was it?
It'd be 5 years ago.
Yeah, I think I contacted you. You put like the beginning of the football season. You always like put up my old one and some of the things. I'm thinking, Jesus, not rolling that back out again. I don't even think any of that's true anymore. So yeah, I think I have to do another one.
Yeah, no, dive straight back into the archive. I like to put them back out, but then I was actually pulling some bits of audio together, and I went back and I listened to myself and go, "Oh my God, why do I keep regurgitating these? These should be gone. These should be, under lock and key somewhere." But it's good to get you back on and do a recap. So I know people can listen because they can get your background and stuff from the old one, but let's refresh it to make sure no one ever listens to me as of before last week. Yeah. So a bit of background on you, and if anything's changed, obviously lots have changed at the club and changed again. But a bit of background on you, mate.
All right then. So my current job. So I'm head of sports science, first team fitness coach at Southampton. It's kind of like a dual role really. So I'm an employed member of staff with the club. So one half of my role is overseeing sort of the strategic implementation of sports science, strength and conditioning across the club. So that's academy, girls and women's, and first team. And then sort of in addition to that, my day-to-day job is working with Ralph and his team and first team coaches in planning, organising and delivering that first team schedule and first team training and match programme. So it's a dual role really. I really enjoy it. It allows me to obviously still coach and still deal with players, but also look at that management side and keep me refreshed and gives me energy going on not at the minute, but I'll go on a Friday afternoon and watching my junior academy coaches working with under nines and seeing sort of James Grant and the excellent stuff he does with the girls and women's teams in the evening. So it affords me that flexibility within a role to sort of keep enthused as well. So I've been here for just over 7 years. So I started off Lead Academy and then got my current role sort of 5 years ago. Worked with a couple of coaches in that time. Coaches have come and gone, players have come and gone. But we've got a real good system here. We've got really good staff, good people, good support from above, which I know is a frequent gripe that people have on podcasts and on Twitter and social media. But we're really fortunate that we're supported sort of at board level in terms of allowing us to do our role with the managers as they come and go, and do our best to support them. So hopefully we'll be as successful as possible. We've also got Matt Jarvis, who's come in the last few years as sort of head of performance, who's done a real good job. I'll touch on that a little bit later on. We'll talk about some of the COVID stuff. So before that, I guess my beginnings, humble beginnings. So I did my undergrad at Leeds Met, and I think that's probably changed its name more times than I've had managers.
Is it back?
What is it now? Leeds Beckett. Leeds
Beckett, I think, yeah.
Leeds Beckett, we're wrong with that. So I did my undergrad there, did my masters there. So I went straight on to do a masters. Again, that's a bone of contention whether they're worth doing or not doing at the minute.
We'll come back to that as well.
So did my masters straight off the bat and did an internship with Leeds Rhinos as part of that. Again, internships and not getting paid. Top of everyone's list at the minute. And then I was fortunate enough to be offered a full-time role off the back of that. So I stayed there for 5 years during a pretty successful time. Again, worked with some really good coaches and players and staff. And some of the stuff like Tony Smith, who I was fortunate, he was a head coach in my first full-time role. I still think about some of the stuff that he did, and he's one of the best coaches that I've worked with. So some of the learnings from that. And then, as with all people in professional sport, I lost my job. I was unemployed for 14 months. So I was labouring and putting up marquees and doing corporate team build events and random bits and bobs. Yeah, and then I started at Southampton in the academy. Oh no, I missed one out. I started lecturing after that. Hartbury, yeah. Yes. So I did a bit of part-time at Leeds Met, and then I got a full-time job lecturing at Hartbury down in Gloucester. I was there for 18 months, sort of delivering on their strength and conditioning programs, some applied physiology programs, some employability stuff. Really good place to teach, because it's a place that that teaches people to coach. I'm actually, rather than teaching people to research, which is that's not my area of expertise or interest. So it was a really good place for me to be. And then I fortunately got a role at Southampton sort of 7 years ago. So, and I'm still there now, touch wood.
Was it always the plan to go from academy to first team, or were you thinking that you'd be as Des Ryan would call it, a lifelong academy coach?
No, if I'm being frank, it was, having been in first team sport originally, it was a way back into sport. It's the way I pitched it. That being said, I was pretty upfront and clear about that when I came in. But I did have that experience of leading people, leading others, writing programs, writing strategies that I'd had before. So I was probably quite handy in that area. Also, having worked in education and players of a similar age, sort of 18, 19, 20, so I'm working with players where I was lecturing people of that similar age. I sort of had the other skills that I needed to work with people of that age. But I always wanted to get back in first team. Whilst I like I say, I enjoy being around the academies. It's not my area of expertise. I'm fortunate that I'm surrounded by Sam Scott and his crew that are absolutely brilliant. But I wanted to get back in the first team. And again, it's not the Twitter brigade. I want the tracksuit and the initials. I enjoy the pressure. I enjoy the week to week. I enjoy trying to deal with problems real quickly. And that probably is more apparent in a first team setting than an academy setting.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely get that. How important has it been to keep that coaching thread throughout? Because obviously the further you go up, the traditional, I suppose, thought process is that how you go up, the less coaching you're going to do. But it sounds like you've got that thread running through, which I guess has been pretty important for you, longevity-wise.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty fortunate in that regard that I get to double up on both, and I know not a lot of people get to do that. Like you say, they get the typical route as you get. You're typically reasonable at your job, otherwise you don't hang around too long. And then you're good at one thing, which might be dealing with players and coaching, and then you get stuck in an office writing post-it notes on a wall and strategies, which again is a skill set in itself, and getting people and staff motivated to do that, which is something I'm working on. But yeah, it gives me, at the minute, it's something that I really enjoy doing. I enjoy that energy of the players, whether we win, lose or draw, and trying to turn that energy around. And being on pitch is something that I enjoy, and I'm aware that I'm probably going to last forever. So I'm going to enjoy it whilst it does last, and work on that other skill set whilst that's going on, really.
Where do you go for your own education when it comes to that strategy side? Or is that something that you just developed from your lecturing and from your Leeds work up in Leeds?
Yeah, I think it's an ongoing thing. I think I'm quite logical and methodical in how I think, so that I would say it comes easy to me from that regard. But for myself, I think the bit I found difficult is taking other people with you. Like, if you're like, I would be probably classed as introvert and quite serious by some people, not others. But it's like, in my own mind, I'm quite good at thinking and writing things down and process. But I think that emotional side and getting people's buy-in and getting people to come with you is something that I need to work on. Mark Jarvis, who works with us a minute, is really good at that. We've got a fella called Brunchweiler, who's works with our coaching staff. Again, he's someone who's really good at strategy and management and leadership. So those two I've worked quite closely with the last 2 years in trying to refine that element. But there's other bits and bobs where there's loads of stuff out there, and there's loads of stuff and books and social media and the internet, and it's just, I think the key to it is having all those resources, whether it be people, whether it be reading on social media, but then just affording yourself a little bit of time to try and digest and form them thoughts into something worthwhile, rather than going with the wind and changing your mind when you read something different. So I think having all that information is good, but having some time just to consider that and consider where you think things are important, and that's ever changing. Like our strategy last year, or my strategy last year, was probably uprooted at around March time, and that needed to change. But I think having that in the first instance and having that sort of cornerstone of what you think is important allows you to be flexible and agile as things change, which they do in professional sport all the time. So I think it is important to have that in the background of things to keep reverting back to.
That brings on nicely to the March, April, May, June mayhem. I'm going through, as probably everyone is, the All or Nothing documentary, the Tottenham one. And obviously last night, so whenever it got released, was when it hit. And obviously just the melee that it was, the confusion amongst the players, the confusion amongst the staff, confusion amongst everyone, of course. How did you guys at that point deal with things and try to get things in place for the worst case scenario, which is probably what actually happened in the end?
Yeah, I think the first case we kind of got an inkling. We played West Ham the week before, and that was when we had. It was more of the emphasis on, at the time, I think the government were just on about washing hands, and it was a bit like it's probably not cutting it at the minute, fellas. So during that week, there was a little like things going in other countries, and obviously we've got players from all around the globe, so they were saying, "Oh, in our country we're doing this. Why aren't we doing this? In our country we're doing this. Why aren't we doing this?" And that in itself was quite an interesting scenario to be in. And then we found out on the morning of we'd just set up for match prep actually. So normally we'd go out, set up, we have the meeting, go out and train, and we had Norwich away. Anyway, we're just about to go out and we get called through from the chief exec. Yeah, it's off. And at that point, it was for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So I think throughout it was really fortunate that things were only ever put off by quite a small period of time. It allowed us to maintain quite a small focus. All right, what do we need to do for this period of time? Wherever originally if they said you aren't playing for 4 months or 5 months, I think that would have been a little bit more difficult from my side and my staff side to program, but also from a player's side to keep engaged.
Yeah, I thought that may have been the other way. That you may, like, at least we know what's happening, but obviously not.
No, I mean, it's difficult. It's always hard to compare between two things when you've only got one of them to deal with. But I think our thing was essentially we got, so straight away off the bat, we got, I turned delivery driver for a day with some of the other staff, so we're just dropping off sort of like watt bikes, a little like gym equipment that we could spread out around ourselves, and then deliver that to the houses of the players. And then we had a sort of a 3-day period where we just give them some stuff to do at home, real basic from our off-season program, just to buy ourselves a little bit more time. So give them 3 days of that, and then we sort of got a little bit more time to structure our support around them. In the end, we ended up having like a little pod-based system where we had 6 players, split the squad into groups of 6 players, and we had one of my types, sort of fitness, S&C, sports science, whatever you want to call them, physio, soft tissue, and then a member of the coaching staff and a member of the psychology team. So in that little pod, just so it's easy to manage. So we had smaller groups to manage in terms of their training. At the beginning of each day, we'd just contact the players. Some would want a phone call, some would want a WhatsApp, some we'd have to ring so they got out of bed. They get their session through an online program. So we use Team Builder. I'm not sure if they're one of your sponsors yet, Rob, or
not yet.
compete,
fine.
or if they're competing with one of them. But we use Team Builder. We found it really easy to use. So they program through that, and then at the end of the day, just a little catch up. Players put stuff on there. It's good. It's got a little leaderboard and all that sort of stuff. And then at the end of each day, so we had pod captains or people that were leading that group, and we just catch up. How's everyone getting on? Any issues that we need to come across? And then obviously within that, our sort of my members of staff, we would talk about what this week's training needs to look like. All right, then working with the medical guys, what do we need to do pre-post to support that? Where are our individual needs within that program? And then make sure that everyone's clear across their players. So whilst I didn't have Prowsey in my group, like I might hold a piece of information that's important for Prowsey's program. Have we shared that across ourselves, and then that feeds back into the group? So it was just found a couple of reasons why. Firstly, it's easier to manage a smaller group. Everyone knows that, rather than me trying to do a group of 24. I think there's also an acknowledgement that we got really, like I mentioned it a few times, but we got really good staff here. And if it was just me that was delivering it, then or Steve Wright just delivering it from a medical's perspective, that'd be a disservice to our staff and the players as well. So we needed to make sure that the expertise was around it. And then within that, there's also elements of fun. So we did videos, they did different challenges, different cooking things and stuff through that WhatsApp group. So that was in terms of structure, how we did it. In terms of what they did, like I said earlier, because we only ever had a 3-week block, we could continue to work. We work in a 3-week cycle anyway. Like our general loading pattern is on a 3-week cycle. So we could go, all right, 3 weeks, we're doing this. At this point, we can review it. And then as it happened, it'd be another 3 weeks. We ended up, there was a period where they gave us 6 weeks. All right, we'll give them 10 days off and then we'll build it back up again. But all through that, and again, as I said before, I'm pretty fortunate we got support from up on high. So in addition to those conversations, I was fortunate to have phone calls probably daily. It was daily actually with our senior managers and board of directors. So they were obviously having communications with the Premier League. So they were giving updates on when we might be coming back. So when we come back, what might training look like, playing look like? Things like when we come back, basically it was, you might have, or you're more than likely going to have 3 weeks of training before you go into the first game, and your first week might have 3 games. So that gave us all right, if that's what that looks like, we've got 3 weeks of football. How do we need to make sure that we're maintaining that level of training at home, that when they come back, like, again, it's something, I'll throw it in there because this will get some fun, but we use acute chronic to program some of our training rather than reduce injuries. I know I'll be getting some angry Australians on Twitter again. But it works for us. So we just use that. Otherwise, you kind of pissing in the wind a bit, like you don't know where you're going. So we knew that we were going to be playing 3 games a week. All right, what does that look like? We had 3 weeks of football before that. What does that look like? What do we need to do at home and supplement in order to make sure we train? So that's basically how we programmed it, and that came down to sort of different running exercises, a little bit of bike stuff, and where we could some strength work. The one thing that, like, whilst it went well, the one thing that we kind of missed off and we had a few issues when we came back was kicking. Like during lockdown, during our period of lockdown anyway, lads weren't allowed out. You couldn't go to the park with someone else to kick a ball. So whilst we're doing block tackling against a Swiss ball and some banded stuff, it's just not the same. And we had, like, nothing serious, but we had a couple of quad related issues when we came back around kicking, and that was something in hindsight that we could have done better on. But it was one of the ones, if you're in a flat in Ocean Village in Southampton and you've got balconies, you're going to struggle doing some kicking. But so yeah, that's pretty much how we programmed it and packaged our supporting around that. And as we got towards the back end, we've gone more towards pitch-based stuff, more high-speed running-based stuff, more of our pitch-based practices here. Things like getting them in boots early. So they've worn trainers for 3 months. All right, how do we get them in boots? Because last thing we need is 2 days in, someone's missing a day's training because they've got a massive blister on the back. So just kind of things, and that was Steve Wright, one of our head of medical. He came up with that one. So just things like that work quite well. So yeah, that's kind of how we dealt with it from that perspective. And the players did really well. Like they attacked it. They, like I say, it was a short. We gave them short blocks. We gave them something with an element of competition each day. We had videos from the manager, from the director, from the chief exec that, like, about why it's important to keep going. Like, we're going to be back playing soon. Like, reinforcing that message that he's coming. Like, normally around the times when, like, if it was in the media or the government, there's no chance of football coming back, we need to get back on them straight away with, we can't be like that. Like, we need to be behaving like it's going to start next week. So the players whilst the staff were brilliant, like, staff were really good, the players got to take some credit for doing the running and getting up. And I mean, let's be honest, they didn't have anything else to do either, but they just stay at home all day. We actually got people running when they didn't have to. They actually found a love for running, whereas normally you get grief for, despite the fact they play a running-based sport, they're not always massive fans of running. So yeah, we got some people into it, and they took accountability for what they're doing. A lot of them came more independent. So yeah, it worked out quite well, in fairness.
One positive, obviously there's a long list of negatives of the whole situation, but was one positive the communication that you had with the senior management of the club? Is that one positive that you could potentially take from this, and the interaction you've had with them, the interaction the players have had with them, the interaction the staff, and actually feeling like you're pulling together in the same direction, which I guess is what these kind of things do.
Yeah, I think that's one of the massive benefits of that of this period is that element. You get a bit of football, and football clubs are surrounded by loads of paraphernalia and loads of stuff, and it got to that point where like you narrowed down that numbers, you narrowed down the intent of what you were doing, and it was quite nice. So yeah, it brought people together. Again, we've got pretty good communication with our directors anyway and our board, so that wasn't necessarily a massive change. I'd say what was a change is there was a genuine togetherness between departments, across departments, to get the job done, and like not just science and medicine and coaching, analysis, psychology. You've got the chefs. Like our security staff were unbelievable in terms of like tomorrow, this is what the setup needs to be. Like we need to have barriers. We need to have this. This is who's coming and when. You need to hold the cars at the door while we get temperature. They can only come one at a time. Operations, we got marquee set up, so players, we weren't allowed to change inside, so they got their own little bit outside. It was just done quickly, and I think that was quite a feel good factor of that. People got on and did the jobs really well, and they did it together. And I think that's, whilst that was evident during that period, I think it does show signs of a good team before that. Like our science and medicine team and some of the work that Jav's done, and myself and Steve and Tom Sturdy done around developing it like a team ethics and team spirit and how we work together and a code of conduct. Whilst that's all well and good when things are nice and easy, like that really came to the fore in terms of that period where it was difficult. So I think that if you've got a pair of people who can't be asked with other people, or I'm the S&C guy, I'm just doing squats and picking heavy things off the floor, I'm not bothering with like that. That didn't happen. People were chipping in wherever was required, and I thought that was top. Like seeing people genuinely work in an integrated manner and enjoying it. That was probably the best part of it.
You mentioned about Mark Jarvis.
Yep.
Right at the start. Where does Mark fit in the structure, and how did his influence and other guys in medics as well help this process, the COVID process?
Yeah, I think you always need that person who's not in the shit, as in like who's not day to day delivering, who can see a bigger picture stuff and has got experience in not in COVID, but Charles works across a lot of sports and dealt with a lot of issues, and his ability to, like I say, when he came in, his primary effort really was best in class processes, making sure our processes are good, and then having good people working well together. Now, when you get to COVID, we needed really good processes and we needed good people working together. So I think in terms of that is coming in and help develop that when, like I say, my role in terms of a head of department, whilst delivering, is nice. It doesn't afford you that time to sometimes step back and look at where are the problems in terms of processes, where are the problems, where communication breaking down, how can we inform that better, and also have some of the conversations that might be more difficult when you work day to day with someone. Mm-hmm. It's the same like with my academy staff. It's easier sometimes for me to go and speak with their coaches on certain matters because they need to, like, they can't afford a day where they're falling out, where I can fall out with them for a day. It doesn't really matter. So I guess in that scenario, he's over there, and then it's like we're name dropping, but like all the staff are brilliant. Like, I can't name all of them. They're probably all turned off now 20 minutes in. But they were all, like all the medical staff, all the sports science staff were top draw through it. And I think the players, actually, you don't always get a thank you from players, and some of the players you never get one, but they were pretty impressed as well with the support that they got. So if you're like your stakeholders are the players and the coaches and they were happy, then we've probably done a decent job.
Mm-hmm. You've talked about your staff actually dealing with this situation, but we spoke off air just about the amount of webinars and all that kind of thing that were going on. How did the staff deal with it from a personal and balancing that personal time, the career time of the uncertainty of it, and maybe feeling pressured into doing all these webinars and getting involved in all these things and Zoom calls and chats and this, that, and the other? How did they find that? Was that something that you think was a positive that's come out of this? Did it become a little bit overwhelming potentially?
I think the nature of people that work in our line of work they're flat out. They generally enjoy being busy and being flat out, and you've all of a sudden you've had that taken away from you, and so they went from being flat out delivering and coaching and doing what they're doing to being flat out learning. So I had to speak with them. I was kind of conscious of it. You don't want to discourage learning, but you don't want to discourage, it needs to be learning with a purpose. So they've all got the development plans, individual development plans is the base around that. But we kind of stripped that back again, and I was like, so pick one of them. I don't know what one element of might be a technical aspect, might be speed, it might be something around lifting, it might be around programming, whatever it is. You can do that. You have to have something on there on that development plan that is fun related. So if that is learning to do something, learn a language, I don't know, everyone took up cycling and running, didn't they?
Yeah.
Everyone went from the gym, they all become 10K exhibitionists. So just making sure that they had that. I think whilst, again, I'm in my role, I was really fortunate, and the first team staff were fortunate that whilst we were at home for a period, we were really busy, and there was an end in sight. Our academy staff, the 21s down, they were kind of had the rug pulled from under them, and there was when is this coming back? They didn't have that 3-week block. They didn't know how long they were doing it for. So it was just a case of trying to make sure that there was directed learning, but also, like I said offline earlier, we work in a pretty attritional industry. Take this time to have some fun, just to relax, to do stuff that you wouldn't ordinarily do, and that's fine, because basically it was what can you do now to influence your players right now, and what can you do to make sure when you come back things will be better. Now, one of those things might be just having more energy because you've actually had a block of time off, or you might have learned something new that isn't to do with that, which you can then, when we come back, allows you to get more energy to deliver to players when you're busy again. So it was just trying to get that into them, and they've had it tough in the fact that, again, like I say, they're all delivering. They've only just started coming back. We've been back for months now, and we've been real fortunate in that we can come in and do our jobs. And since, when was it, May time, we haven't really been affected, whereas they have, and I feel that it's good that they're now back on the ground and coaching and delivering, because it's not the same we'll do deliveries over Zoom. They deal with people, they don't deal with screens. So it is nice that they're back and back and delivering now. But it's important just that they, whilst don't get wrong, some of them were brilliant, weren't they? Some of them webinars were absolutely brilliant. Some of the speakers, some of the content, some of them were shite mind. But it was just picking and choosing rather than going, I'm going to do this one, and it's in Australia and I'm going to stay up all night. I'm like, is that the best choice for you? Can you get a recording? Can you watch it later? But no, they've done a good job. They've kept the academy boys engaged and going, and like I say, they're buzzing to be back in the training ground now.
One online conference that wasn't shite was the one that you did with Altis.
Apart from my hour.
Who did you do it with? Matt? Was it Matt?
Stacey, yeah, I did it with Matt Stacey.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to touch on that if that's all right.
Yeah, that's all right, yeah.
So it was around speed training in football.
Yeah.
Would you be able to give us a bit of a overview of the potentially clubs, departments, philosophy, or general thoughts when it comes to speed training in your environment? And it'd be interesting, has that changed over the 7 years that you've been there? Obviously, you were in the academy, so maybe slightly different to first team, but maybe in the first team environment, how that's changed, and how potentially was it influenced by previous experience in different sports? Be interesting to get your thoughts on that.
I think there's so first of all, the Alex thing was really good. It was actually one of the most intimidating things I've done, because I'm speaking about something that isn't necessarily my area. It's not my area of expertise. I've got staff that deliver that because they're better at it than I am. And obviously you've got people who've been on your podcast, they're experts in speed, and we kind of try and pick bits of that and put it in our setting. So essentially we were just trying to explain how we deliver it. So I'll talk about what we do now, and then I'll talk about what's maybe changed from what we've done in the past. So first and foremost, we know that speed's massively important for football. It's whilst we don't get hit maximum speed a lot of the time, when we do hit it, it's often in game defining moments, whether that be scoring a goal or preventing a goal. So first and foremost, that's important. Our current manager, that's one of his key things for him. Like, he wants people that are quick and can repeat that. So obviously in our role, we're supporting performance in matches, we're supporting training. That also then, even though it already was, needs to be high up our order of importance. And also when we've looked at from an academy perspective, whilst fitness testing isn't a precursor to progression through an academy, pretty much the one physical element that does dictate with the players that progress and the ones that don't is often speed. So from that element as well, it is obviously important for us to train that. So in terms of how we do that, we don't have, we don't have pre-seasons where you have big speed blocks. We don't have time in the week where we can necessarily put in what would be a traditional track and field speed session. But we put elements in there. So in terms of speed, there's a couple of things that we look at. We'll talk about mechanics first, because that's the key one at the minute. People do and don't do them, and why they do and don't do them. We do look at mechanics. We probably don't drill them in the same way that track and field coaches might drill them. We probably go down more of a constraints-based learning approach, in terms of, if we're looking at front side mechanics, how can we just space discs out in order to encourage that front side mechanics? So we'll drill them with that. We do A-skip, speed-skip, same as other people do. We find that players don't necessarily engage or aren't overly interested in that element of it. If we put in a constraints-based learning, it does get a little bit more engagement. So we have elements of that. We do look at things like pelvic positions is important for speed. Like, how do we encourage that with wall drills as part of our pre-ab or pre-act? So that's part of our sessions. We'll work, the physios work in terms of that pelvic alignment as well, and movement and how that's controlled. Things like ankle stiffness, reactivities comes through our warm-ups and through some of our gym-based programming as well. So there's elements throughout a week that would look like speed training, but we don't necessarily have speed sessions. Reason we do that, it's performance-based, but also it comes with an injury reduction element as well. Like, they have to sprint, you have to do it properly. If we can do that more efficiently, it becomes more important. In terms of, in our opinion, in terms of that reduction of injury risk. So it is important, first and foremost. Previously, I'll go back to what we would have done it quite in isolation. So yes, we have gym base, we get them strong, and our transfer of that would be, we just get them to sprint. Now that's changed a little bit, I guess, more from a philosophical perspective, but I've been here longer and I've been around coaches longer, and that element now is, how can I encourage that through drills? So how can we get training to allow that element in there? Sometimes that happens naturally. Sometimes I have to encourage that, whether that be a pitch size or a type of drill or a type of exercise, whether that be a phase of play, a transition drill, might be a finishing drill. How can, like, the initiation of sprint and the distance to sprint, how can we work with coaches to do that? So it is that game speed and game-based approach, if you like. So it's how we design our pitch-based sessions to elicit that speed element, and how do we get appropriate off-pitch sessions in order to sort of develop force and the ability to express force, and then how we transfer that onto pitch is kind of our two main areas.
I don't want you to mention any names or put you in a situation you don't want to be in, but when it comes to coaches and doing that, what you just mentioned there, as in influencing what goes on in their potential technical, not tactical, but technical sessions, like a finishing drill, has it become easier for you with more modern coaches, newer coaches, because they're more switched on to that type of thing, rather than 7, 8, 9 years ago, when that may not have been the case? Maybe like modern education, coach education.
I think there's an element of that. I'll take it back. There's a bit of, so Our job is, so let's strip it back a little bit. Our job is, can our players play how the manager wants them to play? Fundamentally, he wants them to play like this. We've got a manager at the minute that needs them to sprint more. So training, we can encourage that. The level below that is, do we train how he wants them to play? Mm-hmm. And that isn't always the case. So there have been times where, at the minute, we train quite closely to how we play in terms of intensity, in terms of metrics, however you want to call it. Like, it looks like when you watch training and you watch a match, it looks similar. Mm-hmm. Like, you can see where the transit. Sometimes we want to play like this, but training looks like this. Like, whether that's intensity, whether that's like say extensive nature in terms of high speed running, sprint distance. We don't do anything during the week, but on a weekend we're looking at match stats and going, well, we don't do this, we don't do that. That might be set up a team. Like, it could be system, it could be style of play, it could be, if we're sitting in a deep block 5-4-1, we're not going to sprint about too much. If we're pressing high up, you're going to sprint a bit more. So the element from then is, all right, if we're not going to train how we want them to play, can I try and encourage that coaching element? Now, some of them are better at developing and devising drills. They're all better than that, and I am. But in terms of replicating how we want to play, some of them don't necessarily know that. So having someone like me to go, actually, you do know that if we did it like this, it would help us playing a little bit more like this. Sometimes they don't actually know. Sometimes they don't want to know. But then in order to get that element, you need to have trust, you need to have a relationship. And unfortunately, in our line of work, whether it's a new coach on a new style of learning or an old coach on an old style of learning, unfortunately, they don't always have the opportunity to hang around too much. Like, it takes time to build trust. Like, if you've got a player, if you work with a player for 5 years, like, I know a conversation with a player I've had for 5 years is better, more effective, and more efficient than one I've had with a conversation with a player we've had for 1 year or less than 1 year. It's the same with coaches. Like, there's also when you work in this environment, coaches have a certain type of session and drills and things that are probably quite consistent. Once in my role, I get an idea of what that is. It's easy to tweak that a little bit. Or like, the 6-goal game in this pitch size is really good. Could we make it a little bit bigger, or could we put this rule in? This is why. But if you don't know what that session is, you kind of need to sit and wait for a little bit until you understand where the session's going. Or the other side to that is that if that doesn't get there, then you need to do that top-up work or that condition on the side. Now, whilst that might look the same on a GPS report, all right, we've got 1,000 meters of high speed running, you can get that in 8 minutes, whereas in a game it comes in 9 minutes. It's not the same. So preference is always to do it via the game and through the coaches, but you don't always have that time. And also, they also sometimes don't care. So then sometimes you just need to put it in on the side as something else. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's because new coaches and new learning, but there's a few different reasons for why that is the case.
There's a lot of talk around communication and communication styles, and I know it's often quite a fluffy, something that can't really be communicated very well, ironically. Yeah. How has your style changed over time working with coaches, given that short-term mentality as well? Not short-term mentality, but short-term.
Yeah.
You know, that's just the nature of the beast.
I think rather than focusing on coach, I focus on myself rather than the coaches, because I think that's probably a bit easier. But like, if I think of myself 5 years ago, I fell out of the coach because I was just bullying a China shot direct. Your training is this is what we need to do. Why aren't we doing it? Like, I couldn't, in my own mind, it's obvious, isn't it? Like, that's not that.
So that was a head coach?
That was a head coach, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And at the time it was head coach, assistant coach, and one of, he would have been another member of the coach, and he was more fitness related at the time. And I was just bullying, trying to, that's wrong, that's right, that's wrong. And that's probably about the last time I did a podcast with you, and it's not as black and white as that. Like, it's probably one of the things that's probably immature, really, and one of the things I see in my now like more junior members of staff. I think that's not, like, it isn't black or white, it isn't right or wrong. There's just shades of differences. So not that I'm any less like upfront. I'll be straight and honest, but I've probably got a better awareness of where they're coming from. I actually spend a bit more time trying to understand, like, what are they actually trying to achieve and how can I impact that, rather than at the time I was probably thinking, what am I trying to achieve? And yeah, they've got their bit and I've got my bit. Whereas I'm probably a lot more collective in that approach. In terms of communication, again, once you know people over time, you know, like there's certain, it's like, I don't know, your missus or your mates, there's certain times in the day when you don't want to talk about certain things. There's certain ways that you want that information. You've got a coach now who, like in terms of preparing numbers for a week, a phone call on a Sunday in a general gist of what we need on the week and what we need on what days and who might need a little bit more and less is fine. Whereas some might want like piece and word document of a PDF, like with all the numbers and reports. Like that's my job to find out what they want and what they need and adapt to that rather than me going, well, I've told them, so they should know, which that was maybe 5 or 6 years ago. To be fair, it could be me on a bad day. But it's, taking that time to understand what information is required and how people want to receive that. That's key to anything, though. That's not just working with the manager, that's key to working with any of my staff. It's key, like understanding, whilst it is fluffy, and I think Madden will be on it, he's not a big fan of that, but it is important in this environment, it's important. But I think within that, and something I spoke about development plans, one of mine is, like, you still need to maintain true to yourself. Like I have to be, because my go-to is to be just straight up front and honest and blunt, I have to try and temper that. But there's times where that is required. You just need to know when that is and when the best time to deliver that is, because like this is stressful enough work as it is, industry as it is, you can't then pretend to be someone else for the duration of it when you're having conversations, and sometimes it is up to you, and like you'll see medical guys on the Tottenham show, like it's up to them to deliver bad news, and sometimes you've just got to front up and say it how it is. But yeah, having a better awareness of how and when people receive information is probably key.
Just one more question on the sprint stuff. One thing you mentioned on the presentation was individualizing repeat sprintability.
Yeah.
I think, I hadn't spoke about this particular topic, and ironically, Marden may have been the one that I spoke about it with. Yeah. But how do you go about that? I know you mentioned how important it is for the manager, but how do you go about influencing that? Maybe a lot of the same things you mentioned previously.
Yeah, but so let's take one of our fastest players. So we got a super fast player, fastest in our squad, one of the fastest in the league. We've still got limited time with that player in terms of that speed development. But whilst everyone will have the generic drills and constraints-based learning and some of the wall drills, and he'll have more specific work around that. So he'll have more work around trunk capacity, he'll have more work around ankle stiffness, more work around pelvic control, because those things, being really fast is really important for him. So if we're looking at, like, whilst everyone's got individual programs, in reality, a lot of people's programs are quite generic with little things that are different. So his thing will be more towards sprint. For instance, we have sent him up with Bill Stiles to Jonas, because like Jonas is better than we are at delivering that. We need to go and use that asset, because that's key for him. So if we've got, he's more directed in that element. So more elements of our training would be pitched at someone who can sprint like that. Also, we've looked to push his max speed as much as possible. We've got that speed reserve. So then if he's working just under that, it's not taking as much out of him. So he can repeat that more effectively. We've got other players, player in midfield, not as quick, but can do, like, his max speed isn't super quick, it's fastish, otherwise you don't play in the Premier League. But he can do that all the time. So there's things around his programming. He might have more aerobic based training. We're not going to spend as much time on like max speed or sprint mechanics or front side, not as much, because it's not as important for him. Whilst it is important, it's not as important. So even things like, from a nutritional perspective, like he have beta-alanine as part of his program, repeat sprintability, like it's part of his program, his work, rather than someone who doesn't necessarily do that as much. So it's, in effect, it's just an acknowledgement that everyone repeatedly sprints, but some of the people in our squad are really fast and sprint a lot, and they might not repeat it quite as quickly. and we've got some people in our squad who aren't as quick but do it quite a lot. And ultimately, there's an acknowledgement that those people need different things in their training from a gym-based perspective as well. You've got players that you might be quite so our repeat sprint ability. The guy who does it a lot but isn't that fast, like he's gym strong, but like he might just need more stuff on transfer. So like more sled work or prowler work, or in order to accelerate quicker, because like he's strong, but he can't translate that to on pitch stuff. So his program in the gym might be slightly different to the speed guy. So it's just an acknowledgement that people, they all do it, but they do it in slightly different ways. Therefore, their training needs to be slightly different as well.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Changing tack completely. One thing I know that is an interesting one for you is advice for young practitioners or any practitioners, and just getting a bit of your thoughts on the university world versus the applied world. And you've been in it a little bit at Hartpury, of course, so you've got first-hand experience, although a little bit ago. What's your thoughts on that? What can having young practitioners come into the club and the stages of their development, maybe you have interns or assistants or whatever it may be. What do you think universities can do better, and are they giving you what you want as an elite football club?
So it's an interesting one because there's always hot debate. It's like the not in our club, but other clubs. It's the equivalent of like when they sign a player, if they're no good, the coaches blame recruitment, and then like recruitment blame the coaches because they were good when they got there, and now they're not good. It's like the educational equivalent of that.
Yeah.
So what I would say is, having worked in both, and I mean, I was on at Hartpury for 18 months. I did a bit of part-time lecturing at Leeds Met back in the day as well. What you'll find, and the crux of the argument, is that a lot of university lecturers know the system isn't great. But if you've ever worked in a university, you are tied up in knots in paperwork that doesn't actually allow you to do the teaching or to sort out a program. Like when I went into Hartpury, I wanted to rewrite it. Having worked in industry, you can see some of the modules, some of the elements weren't, in my opinion, weren't applicable to what they needed to go and do. But it took me 18 months to change one module or two modules. Like, it takes that long to get going. So I don't think there's the staff that don't acknowledge that. There's also an element of, I'll start supporting the universities initially, is that, like, if you've got, I don't know, 150 students, like, you can't, you've got a certain amount of coaches, of lecturers. You have generic modules. You'll have modules where people from other programs are on it, and there's a base level of learning. It isn't the bespoke learning that you might get in an applied environment, a replacement. Now, whilst everyone's saying everyone should do placements as an undergrad, you also can't place that many students unless people in industry take them all. So if you say, as part of your degree, you'll do a placement, that's not the student's responsibility to find it then, it's the program's responsibility. Now, you're already tied up in paperwork, you've got loads of students, you've got marked dissertations, you've got to do research to get your funding, even though you really just want to teach because you want really good practitioners coming, but you've got to do research for your money. You ain't got time to be sourcing that many placements and then dealing and supporting. So I think there's an element of supply and demand issues there that do fund a problem, that do find a problem with that. That being said, in terms of supporting the universities, I've got two people here that were at Hartpury when I was there. I only taught one of them, I didn't teach the other one. And for all people saying universities are crap and they're no good and the courses are no good, everyone that I work with that's really good went to a university. Like, they all went to a university, they all did an undergrad in sports science, strength and conditioning or physio, whatever it was, and they've turned out all right. So to everyone, so all of a sudden we're going, they're shit, their programs are rubbish, they don't teach you anything. Well, they must have done at some point, because the people that are now saying they were shit have progressed from that point. So they can't be all bad. Now, whilst there's room for improvement, there's elements that people maybe don't understand that stop that. I think it's a little bit unfair. There's also a bit of this whole system course, and you look at a sports science course or an S&C course, they're not all the same. So rather than saying they're all rubbish, like the sports science programs are crap, they don't prepare you for anything. Like, it depends what you're preparing them for. If you're like I've got two members of staff in my first team from Birmingham University, so I'm not hammering Birmingham University, but they're quite an academic place. Like they're producing people to do PhDs to get research funded in, by and large, because that's what makes them the money to carry on going. Like, is research. So they're going to have a program that gets real academic smartheads to do research. They're not necessarily designing a program for people to go out and coach. Hartbury are probably a smaller institution, more hands-on. They're probably preparing vocational people to go and coach. So rather than going sports science degrees are crap, S&C courses are crap, they're not. Like there's some real good ones. Like you look at the S&C ones at Middlesex, St Mary's, like Cov. They're like good courses. I've missed them out there. So, but with real
exclusively,
really experienced staff that have done a lot of research and done a lot of coaching. So like up at Leeds Met now, like the car research group up there, Ben Jones and Tilly and all them, they're like smart cookies that deliver, and they deliver to students. They can't all be that bad. But what I would say is, over time, you would encourage them to try and get rid of some of the crap that's on them courses. But then, having said that, I've been taught that if you've got first years who've got no basic grasp of biology or physiology, it's pretty hard to start talking about any complicated like training prescription or response to training if they haven't got like a bare minimum of what's cardiac output and stroke volume. Like, it's real difficult to get that. And again, over a 3-year period, they might be at university for 3 years, but the way it's set up, like how many hours of teaching do you actually get?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think it's like between 8 and 12 hours a week for 12 weeks. Twice a year, and then you're on off again. It's not actually that much contact time. So I think what I would say is whilst not hammering that, trying to encourage and trying to offer opportunities for people to do more is probably the best thing that they can do. So yes, this is your course. Is there anything you can help out with? Like, I've a sample of N equals 1. It was just me. When I was at uni, I coached the rugby league team, the second team, because it was coaching. It was doing what I wanted to do. So there's loads of opportunities like that to develop. So yeah, I'd encourage them to try and get rid of some of that crap where they can. And also, this would probably tee myself up for a job when I finished here, but like, if you to me or this type of work to go back and work in those institutions, like the fundamental issue, like I would go and lecture when I finished here if I knew I was teaching practical applied modules for people who wanted to be there. And I was teaching non-practical, non-applied modules for people who just fancied to do a bit of sport for 3 years. It isn't great, but also there's, like I said earlier, there's that pressure to do research. I don't want to go and do research. Like, I don't want to go and work in university if that's what I've got to do. I want to go and work in university because I want to teach and I want to help people go and do that job. So again, that's not people who put on the programs in university. That's kind of people above them, and in terms of funding and recognizing that it's a role that it's a vocational role, and it needs to be treated as such in the same way that nursing, physio, and placement. So it can be done. So people in work need to accept people on those placements and welcome them in with an acknowledgement that they aren't going to be top dog. Like, again, that's one where students are coming and they haven't got this skill set. Like I said earlier, I did the podcast 5 years ago, and I'd already been working in sport 7 years, and some of the things I said then, I'll look back and think, that is shit. Like, you need to give them a bit of a break. Like, they've had 3 years of study. They're not going to know everything. You need to allow for that. Like, when we come in, I'd say we get second years. So we have interns during their undergraduates. We have 6 or 7 a year between their second and third year, and they are brilliant. Like, they come in. We've got some in now on COVID. They've been in for 4 weeks. And they don't know everything, but they want to learn. They're keen as mustard, and they ask good questions. That'll get you somewhere. Like, that'll get them somewhere. And at the end of the year, they'll probably be in a really good position to go back and teach some of the lecturers some decent stuff. But I think that expectation is in the same way that I'm a coach to players, I'm a coach to members of staff. I don't expect them to come as a polished diamond after 3 years or 3 years in a master's and be able to know how to deal with a manager and deliver bad news, how to implement a games-based approach to speed training, how to program in the gym, how to deal with COVID. Like, that comes with experience. It's the same way as if you're a teacher, you're a newly qualified teacher. I'm pretty sure that 10 years down the line, you're a better teacher than you were when you started. You're a better doctor than when you started. Like, people who are hammering graduates, yeah, some of the courses aren't great, but some of them are brilliant. But they're not going to know everything. Set your standards to accept that when a 17-year-old comes into the first team, he's probably going to be weak as piss. He's probably ain't going to be overly strong and fit, and he's technically probably not going to be quite as good as the other players. That's our job to make them better. The same way as someone coming out of university isn't going to be able to program, isn't going to be able to deal with coaches. That's our job to make them better. I guess that's my piece on that.
Nice. So one last thing I want to ask you. Someone that's been in a football club in the role you've had for 5 years, plus the 2 in the academy?
Yeah.
Something like that? Yeah. That's probably good going for a person of that level, would you say? Do you think that's quite a long tenure, normal kind of tenure?
I don't know. But it probably is long. It probably is relatively long. If you look around the league, it's probably Nath over at Tottenham, and I'm not sure. I wouldn't know too many of the others. Jamie up at Newcastle has been there a while.
Yeah, but let's say it's above average in the grand scheme of things. What do you think has allowed you to not only get the job but keep that job at Southampton?
Good luck and good staff. I don't know. I think it's where no one's ever asked me that, and I've never really asked it myself. So it's a bit of a tough question. I think it's because you need to be flexible, you need to be agile. I think I've learned from my mistakes, like we talked about before, being direct, straight, probably not the best way to go. I've had really good mentors within the club and outside of the club. Like, there's been times where I've just thought, I'm going to jack it in here.
Yeah.
I think so in that way, I've had that support inside the club when things aren't going well. I think there's also an element of it's not always one way. Like, there's opportunities. There has been opportunities to go elsewhere, but I quite like it here. Like, I like living here. I like working here. I like the challenge of the job. But I think there's elements of, say, maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago where I wasn't doing that. You need to look after yourself a bit as well. Like, that's one of the key messages for practitioners is, that you do well to stay around that long, but in order to do that, you need to bring some energy. You need to bring good ideas, and that comes from looking after yourself outside of work. Now, don't get me wrong, we're on a great German model. We're in on Sundays, so Monday's your day off. And if you've not done that before, there's not many people with a Monday off. Everyone's got 1 minute, but just to try and find time for things outside, that's important. But yeah, good staff as well. I've been fortunate to work alongside and recruit some really good staff who, over a period of time, tend to make you look good even when you're not. Like, I've got some of my first, like, I've got Laura, Bill Stiles and Banco in the first team, but like top guys, top practitioners. Same in the academy. We've got Sam Scott running like the schoolboy phase down there, top practitioners. So I think if you recruit good staff and give them some space to grow and develop, that affords you the license to look good from their behalf. But also means that I can continue to balance and manage both jobs effectively, because you've got people that can do the day-to-day stuff. I guess being lucky, like, if we'd not scored that goal at Swansea, we got relegated, who knows where we'd have been at. Like, we've survived by the skin of our teeth over that last 5 years. We got beat 9-0 last year, if you hadn't heard. It gets mentioned every couple of times. So don't get me wrong, there's a massive element of luck in that as well. Like, it would have been very easy to not be that, and that's why, like I said earlier, I'm really fortunate to do my job. There's really good practitioners that have not been as fortunate just because of circumstances, and nothing to do with how they've actually done their job. So I guess in that respect, being a club that actually acknowledges what backroom staff offer to players and to coaches is pretty good as well, and that doesn't happen at a lot of clubs, I don't think.
Cool. Well, I've kept you over an hour. Yeah. Where can people get in touch? Keep what you got going on? Social media? Any?
Yeah, I've got what am I at? Let me just check. I think at Alek Gross on Twitter, and that's pretty much it. I don't do anything else. I don't do any of the stuff. So yeah, find me on Twitter. I'll be on there. You send me messages on that. I tend to get back to people who've got any questions. Again, young goal practitioners. It's nice to chat to people from time to time. So find me on there if you've got any questions. Shoot them over.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I'm going to let you get out of the office and get home.
Cheers, Rob. Cheers, pal.
Thanks for coming back on. Cheers, mate.
No worries. Ta-da.
Bye-bye.